CRS 183203, assault in the second degree. CRS 183203, assault in the second degree. Number one, a person commits the crime of assault in the second degree in the state of Colorado if A, repealed, B, with intent to cause bodily injury to another person, he or she causes such injury to any person by means of a deadly weapon, or C, with intent to prevent one whom he or she knows or should know to be a peace officer, firefighter, emergency medical care provider, or emergency medical service provider from performing a lawful duty, he or she intentionally causes bodily injury to any person, or C.5, with intent to prevent one whom he or she knows or should know to be a peace officer, firefighter, or emergency medical service provider from performing a lawful duty, he or she intentionally causes serious bodily injury to any person, or D, he recklessly causes serious bodily injury to another person by means of a deadly weapon, or E, for a purpose other than lawful medical or therapeutic treatment, he intentionally causes stupor, unconsciousness, or any or other physical or mental impairment or injury to another person by administering to him without his consent a drug, substance, or preparation capable of producing the intended harm, or F, while lawfully confined or in custody, he or she knowingly and violently applies physical force against the person of a peace officer, firefighter, or emergency medical service provider engaged in the performance of his or her duties, or a judge of a court of competent jurisdiction, or an officer of said court, or while lawfully confined or in custody as a result of being charged with or convicted of a crime, or as a result of being charged as a delinquent child or adjudicated as a delinquent child, he or she knowingly and violently applies physical force against a person engaged in the performance of his or her duties while employed by or under contract with the detention facility as defined in Section 18-8-2033, or while employed by the division in the Department of Human Services responsible for youth services, and who is a youth services counselor is in the youth services worker classification series, and the person committing the offense knows or reasonably should know that the victim is a peace officer, firefighter, or emergency medical service provider engaged in the performance of his or her duties, or a judge of a court of competent jurisdiction, or an officer of said court, or a person engaged in the performance of his or her duties while employed by or under contract with the detention facility, or while employed by the division in the Department of Human Services responsible for youth services. A sentence imposed pursuant to this paragraph F shall be served in the Department of Corrections and shall run consecutively with any sentences being served by the offender, except that if the offense is committed against a person employed by the division in the Department of Human Services responsible for youth services, the court may grant probation or a suspended sentence in whole or in part, and the sentence may run concurrently or consecutively with any sentences being served. A person who participates in a work release program, a furlough, or any other similar authorized, supervised, or unsupervised absence from a detention facility as defined in Section 18-8-2033, and who is required to report back to the detention facility at a specified time is deemed to be in custody. F.5. I. While lawfully confined in a detention facility within this state, a person with intent to infect, injure, harm, harass, annoy, threaten, or alarm a person in a detention facility whom the actor knows or reasonably should know to be an employee of a detention facility causes such employee to come into contact with blood, seminal fluid, urine, feces, saliva, mucus, vomit, or any toxic, caustic, or hazardous material by any means, including but not limited to throwing, tossing, or expelling such fluid or material. 2. Repealed. 3A. As used in this paragraph, F.5, detention facility means any building, structure, enclosure, vehicle, institution, or place, whether permanent or temporary, fixed or mobile, where persons are or may be lawfully held in custody or confinement under the authority of the state of Colorado or any political subdivision of the state of Colorado. B, as used in this paragraph, F.5, employee of a detention facility includes employees of the Department of Corrections, employees of any agency or person operating a detention facility, law enforcement personnel, and any other persons who are present in or in the vicinity of a detention facility and are performing services for a detention facility. Employee of a detention facility does not include a person lawfully confined in a detention facility. G, with intent to cause bodily injury to another person, he or she causes serious bodily injury to that person or another. Or H, with intent to infect, injure, or harm another person whom the actor knows or reasonably should know to be engaged in the performance of his or her duties as a peace officer, a firefighter, an emergency medical care provider, an emergency medical service provider. He or she causes such person to come into contact with blood, seminal fluid, urine, feces, saliva, mucus, vomit, or any toxic, caustic, or hazardous material by any means, including by tossing, by throwing, tossing, or expelling such fluid or material. Or I, lowercase I, with the intent to cause bodily injury, he or she applies sufficient pressure to impede or restrict the breathing or circulation of the blood of another person by applying such pressure to the neck or by blocking the nose or mouth of the other person, and thereby causes bodily injury. 2A, if assault in the second degree is committed under circumstances where the act causing the injury is performed upon a sudden heat of passion caused by a serious and highly provoking act of the intended victim, affecting the person causing the injury sufficiently to excite an irresistible passion in a reasonable person without an interval between the provocation and the injury sufficient for the voice of reason and humanity to be heard, it is a class 6 felony. B, if assault in the second degree is committed without the circumstances provided in paragraph A of this subsection 2, it's a class 4 felony. B.5. Assault in the second degree by any person under subsection 1 of this section without the circumstances provided in paragraph A of this subsection 2 is a class 3 felony if the person who is assaulted, other than a participant in the crime, suffered serious bodily injury during the commission or attempted commission of or flight from the commission or attempted commission of murder, robbery, arson, burglary, escape, kidnapping in the first degree, sexual assault in the first or second degree as such offenses existed prior to July 2000, or class 3 felony sexual assault on a child. C.I. If a defendant is convicted of assault in the second degree pursuant to paragraph C.5 of subsection 1 of this section or paragraph B.5 of this subsection 2, except with respect to sexual assault or sexual assault in the first degree as it existed prior to July 1st, 2000, the court shall sentence the defendant in accordance with the provisions of section 18-1.3-406. A defendant convicted of assault in the second degree pursuant to paragraph B.5 of this subsection 2 with respect to sexual assault or sexual assault in the first degree as it existed prior to July 1st, 2000 shall be sentenced in accordance with section 18-1.3-401 8E or A8E.5. II, if a defendant is convicted of assault in the second degree pursuant to paragraph B, C, D, or G of subsection 1 of this section, the court shall sentence the offender in accordance with section 18-1.3-406, except that, notwithstanding the provisions of section 18-1.3-406, the court is not required to sentence the defendant to the Department of Corrections for a mandatory term of incarceration. D, for purposes of determining sudden heat of passion pursuant to subsection 2A of this section, a defendant's act does not constitute an act performed upon a sudden heat of passion if it results solely from the discovery of, knowledge about, or potential disclosure of the victim's actual or perceived gender, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation, including but not limited to under circumstances in which the victim made an unwanted, non-forcible, romantic, or sexual advance toward the defendant. Number 3, repealed. CRS 18.3.203, assault in the second degree. Assault in the second degree, 18.3.203.